She signed the divorce papers laughing, until the judge handed her a DNA result I never showed her. I'm a 36-year-old man, and if I close my eyes I can still see the exact curl of my wife's smile as she signed our divorce papers like she was autographing a fan's t-shirt. She slid the pen back with a flourish, dabbed at an imaginary tear, and waited for applause. Then the judge cleared his throat, lifted an envelope I'd filed under seal, and said, "Mrs. Ward, there's one more document for you to review." When she unfolded the paper, the color left her face so fast I swear I heard it. That piece of paper, one I hadn't shown her, was a DNA report. It didn't explode so much as it vacuumed the air out of the room. But that's the end of the beginning. Let me rewind. My wife, ex-wife, is Laura. We met at a volunteer cleanup by the river. She was the one bossing everyone into a line and making it charming. I was the guy with a cart full of extra trash bags. She said I had quiet hero energy. I thought she had light trapped in her skin. We dated 2 years, married in a rented greenhouse with twinkle lights and speeches that aged badly. The first time she cried on our couch it was because the world felt too slow. I put my arm around her and promised to keep pace. We wanted a kid. Or rather, she did, urgently, with the kind of timeline people use for catching trains. I wanted one too, but not as proof of anything. When nothing happened after a year, we did the tests. The doctor's eyebrows made a shape like a tent when he looked at my numbers: low motility, the kind of statistics that make words like maybe heavy. We talked about options, about waiting, about not making this our whole personality. A month later, Laura came home glowing. "Late," she said, smiling like a secret. She waved a stick with 2 lines. I cried in the dumb, relieved way men cry when they think a door opened by miracle. Our daughter, Ellie, arrived in winter. I held her under those awful hospital lights and thought, this is the first true thing. She had Laura's mouth and a tiny swirl of hair like mine. Friends came with casseroles. My sister Hannah brought a blanket she'd knit crooked on purpose. Laura's parents took 1,000 photos and said, "She's a ward," like it was an incantation. The first crack didn't look like a crack. It looked like a new perfume and late, team dinners, and the way Laura's phone developed a nervous habit of flipping face down when it vibrated. I told myself that's just the season: new parents, work pressure, sleep deprivation doing weird math to our brains. Then small shadows started to organize themselves into shapes. A hotel rewards email for a stay I didn't book. A receipt in the pocket of her coat from a wine bar across town, 2 glasses, 2 desserts, a scribbled heart next to the signature. An Uber trip at midnight to an address that wasn't Megan's, her best friend, but she'd said she was with Megan. When I asked, she frowned like a teacher disappointed in a student. "Can I live?" she said, half laughing. "I'm allowed to have a life outside diapers and meetings." I wanted to be the man who didn't turn into a detective. I hate detectives. They stand outside windows and miss the whole party. So I put my phone down when my hand moved toward it at night. I reminded myself how much I loved the bowl of her head under my chin, the way Ellie's breath sounded like a tiny saw when she slept. I told myself that suspicion is a habit people use to feel powerful when they're scared. Then my father died. He was not a rich man, he was a man who repaired furnaces and knew how to fold a map without breaking it. But he left a will that surprised me, a small savings and our creaky old house, with a note about a trust he'd set aside years ago for his first grandchild, of my blood. It wasn't a fortune. It was enough to matter to a young family. The lawyer said we'd need to prove Ellie was biologically mine to release it, a line my father had added not out of paranoia but because he liked the idea that blood could be traced like a story. I almost laughed at how old-fashioned it sounded. I didn't tell Laura about the requirement because I didn't want our daughter turned into a swab and a lab number in conversation. I figured I'd handle the paperwork quietly and surprise her when the funds hit our account. I bought a cheek swab kit, the kind with sterile Q-tips and a code number that looks like it belongs on a shipping crate. I took samples from myself and Ellie while she was half asleep after a bottle, kissing her tiny cheek like an apology the whole time. I mailed it with hands that shook and told myself biology was boring when a baby already knows your heartbeat from the inside. 2 weeks later, an email pinged at work. Your results are ready. I clicked with the same mindless impulse you use to open weather apps. The PDF loaded, full of words that pretend to be gentle: probability of paternity, combined index. The number that mattered sat in a small, unfriendly box, 0%. I read it once, then out loud to the empty office, like saying it would make it fold into sense. It didn't. The room doubled. My fingers went numb, then hot, then nothing. Denial sprinted in. Lab error. Barcode mix-up. I ordered a second test from a different company the way people order miracle tonics. Same result. 0%. Not unlikely. Not inconclusive. 0. I closed my laptop and sat in a conference room with the lights off until Hannah called to ask if I'd eaten. I told her a version of the truth that fit into one sentence. She said, "Come over," in a voice that had no adjectives. At her kitchen table, I spread the printouts like bad tarot. Hannah's face did that thing where it tries to be steel and ends up being rain. "You love Ellie," she said. "That's true. Nothing changes that. And then, because she is my sister, but we're not doing pretend." She asked about the receipts. The late nights. The new perfume. The way Laura had started using the word controlling to describe me, suggesting a shared calendar for childcare. She didn't tell me what to do. She slid a pen across the table and made me write the timeline down so my brain wouldn't turn it into fog. I confronted Laura that weekend. Not with the lab report. I had a feral instinct to protect Ellie from becoming a weapon, but with my actual body and voice. I said I felt distance. I asked if there was someone else. She laughed. Not cruelly at first, just the way people laugh when their joke gets interrupted by a fire alarm. Then she tilted her head and switched to a tone I'd never heard used on me. "You're paranoid," she said. "You want to put a GPS on me next?" When I said we should do counseling, she nodded like a principal who'd decided on detention, "If it makes you feel better." That night I found a phone I didn't recognize in the back of her closet in an old boot. Burner. Cheap, ugly case. The lock screen lit up with a new message: "You free Sunday?" E. The thread scrolled with a shape I wish I didn't recognize: inside jokes, quick hotel room numbers, the kind of tenderness that only shows up when it's hiding. E was Ethan, her new manager. We'd met once at a Christmas party where he called me buddy and squeezed my shoulder like he was shaping clay. I didn't explode. I took pictures. I forwarded the thread to my email and to a drive I keep for tax receipts and warranties because my brain needed a box that made sense. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat on our porch steps until the cold turned my bones into clarifying rods. I wish I could say I left then. I didn't. Love is part glue, part coward. Also, there was Ellie. She didn't ask for adults to be stupid. I slept in the guest room, so she and Laura could rest, and told no one at work because I didn't want to be the man with the story. I kept being dad at 3 a.m. with the bottle and the sway. I kept sending daycare payments and wiping counters and pretending the word family meant reparable. Then came the second surprise, the one that turned the moral mess into something measurable. A letter from Laura's mother arrived, written on stationery that smelled like old perfume. Inside, a note addressed to me as if Laura wouldn't read it: "I'm sorry to intervene, but there is a matter that must be aired. Our family has a small fund for grandchildren. It is intended for those of our blood." She invited me, to bring Ellie by next week so they could finalize the paperwork. I could hear the subtext like a whistle only certain animals hear. She was making sure I was the father. Maybe she suspected something. Maybe she was just an old woman who liked rules. I set the letter next to my father's will and stared at both like they were two mirrors facing each other. The math was ugly. Laura's family money asked for blood. My father's money asked for blood. The numbers in my folder said 0. My daughter's face said everything else. I reached out to someone I'd never met, Maya, Ethan's wife. I wrote a message that felt like a crime and pressed send. She replied with speed that told me either she already knew, or she'd been waiting for someone besides herself to confirm the shape of the shadow. Coffee, she wrote. In person, she had that exhausted beauty people get when they've been apologizing to themselves for years. She slid her phone across the table with messages I recognized from the burner. She had dates, work retreats that overlapped, afternoons that flipped stories upside down. In one, Ethan wrote, "You're sure?" And Laura replied, "As sure as 2 lines and a late period." Date, almost exactly 9 months before Ellie. I brought all of it to a lawyer recommended by a friend who didn't ask for details. We talked about paternity, about best interests, about how to love a child who might not be yours without getting legally trapped by someone else's lies. He told me family court is allergic to fireworks. If you want to protect yourself, he said, document quietly. Don't scorch the earth. Judges smell smoke and assume arson. We filed for divorce in language that was boring on purpose. We requested a private review of evidence under seal. I didn't post a thing. I didn't talk to anyone who loved drama more than me. I still went to 3 a.m. feedings. Laura's behavior shifted as if she could feel a weather front at her back. She became saccharine at breakfast and cruel by dinner. She accused me of checking her phone. I didn't touch it again. She told her mother I was withdrawing and maybe depressed. She cried in the living room when visitors came. She also started leaving printouts around, how to support a new mom, signs of a controlling partner, as if she was planting evidence in our house like seeds. 2 days before our first hearing, she came home early, spun the wedding ring on the table like a coin, and said, "This whole marriage was a mistake. You don't excite me. I'm going to be happy, finally." She giggled while she said it, like it was a line from a show. I felt a clean, weird calm. "Sign the papers," I said. "Let's both be happy." She laughed harder. "You think you're getting out of child support that easy?" She tapped the table with a fingernail. "Nice try." On the morning of court, she dressed like a magazine cover for Triumph. Megan, the same best friend who'd posted relationship goals under our vacation photos, sat on her side of the aisle, eyes fixed on the floor. My side was small, Hannah, Mark from work, and a calm I didn't recognize as mine. The judge asked basic questions, the kind that reduce a life to check boxes. Laura signed first with a pen flourish. She turned to me with that smile and mouthed, "Bye." The judge lifted an envelope. "Before we finalize any orders regarding custody and support, there is evidence filed under seal that bears on parentage," he said. "I'm going to mark it as Exhibit C and provide a copy to both parties." Laura's face did a small, annoyed crumple, the expression of someone whose latte didn't have enough foam. She took the paper, glanced, and then her eyes caught the number that had eaten my brain for weeks. 0%. She flipped the page like maybe a better result was on the back. There wasn't a back. She looked at me the way people look at mirrors that suddenly refuse to make them thinner. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then laughed again, small and wrong. "This is ridiculous," she said to the judge. "He's trying to humiliate me." Her voice had the sharp, performative edge she uses when she wants the room to vote. The judge's tone didn't change. "There are 2 independent reports from accredited labs," he said. "And corroborating messages indicating potential parentage by another party." "Counsel?" My lawyer stood so calm I wanted to hug him. We said very little. The evidence sat in the air being heavier than us. "That's where I left you in the first paragraph," Laura laughing like a person who has never met gravity, the judge holding a document that would rewire our futures, me breathing like a man who had been underwater for too long and was only now realizing he could stand. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded with all the little untruths that had found each other and formed a chorus. Laura's laugh kept trying to march forward, but each copy of 0.00% on the page tripped it. She moved to the next defense the way people step through a playbook. "He's controlling," she said to the judge. "He's been spying on me, planting ideas. He won't let me have friends." The judge didn't blink. "What I have, Mrs. Ward, are lab reports and messages. Please sit." Her attorney asked for a recess so sudden his chair made a noise. Granted. We moved to a small side room where the laminate table had seen better families. Laura's lawyer leaned in with the quaver of someone realizing they'd been playing checkers while the other table was chess. "If you withdraw the support request," he said to me, "we can keep this private." Private. I thought about the nights I'd kept private while a stranger's perfume lived in my pillow. I thought about a folder in my bag and a daughter at daycare whose only concern was whether the orange cup was available. My lawyer said we would proceed as filed. Back in the courtroom, Laura pivoted to the only place left, tears. "Real, I think, but weaponized. I made a mistake," she whispered. "I was lonely. He worked too much. It happened once." The messages in our exhibits had dates enough to turn that sentence into confetti. The judge didn't want our marriage story. He wanted to know one thing: who Ellie's legal parents were, and what arrangement would keep her safe. "I am not going to adjudicate your romance," he said. "I am going to ensure this child's welfare." We settled 3 things that day, all at once and all with the dull, powerful force of stamps. First, the divorce was granted. Second, child support from me was paused pending determination of biological parentage and a plan that recognized Ellie's relationship with me without allowing fraud to become law. Third, the court would notify the other potential father named in our exhibit, Ethan, since his rights and obligations might be implicated. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for a visitation schedule because I am, no matter the numbers, the man who knows which stuffed animal Ellie reaches for when she's tired of people and wants fabric. Laura glared like the room had betrayed her. When the judge handed her the copy of the DNA report, my sealed Exhibit C, she pressed her palm over the number like skin could rewrite ink. The laugh was gone. In its place was the small, brittle sound I'd heard the night she told me I wasn't exciting and I said, "Sign the papers." The kind of sound you make when the long rehearsal for a story crashes into a prop that will not move. What happened after was not a movie. It was logistics. Ethan was served. His wife, Maya, had already told him to pack a bag before the papers even hit his palm. He denied at first, then went silent, then sent a single sentence through counsel: "I will test." The test said what the screen-grabbed messages had already said in 1,000 indirect ways, 99.97%. Laura fired one lawyer and hired another with sharper hair. She started saying words like coercion and emotional neglect in rooms where they sounded like fireworks with wet fuses. The court kept bringing it back to Ellie. To routines. To nap schedules. To the way children can drown in adult storms if you forget to check whether they can swim. My own house became the kind of quiet that has furniture. I moved into the guest room full-time before I found a small apartment with a soft window and a landlord who didn't ask for a biography. I set it up in a way that made sense for visits: low shelf, cup with her favorite orange dot, 3 duplicates of the same bunny in case we forgot one somewhere and needed to pretend it teleported. I learned how to cook toddler food that tastes like kindness and not a compromise. The social fallout behaved like weather. Some people moved to the high ground with me and brought blankets. Hannah. Mark. A neighbor who slipped a note under my door that said, "You are not crazy," with a muffin. Others floated away on separate rafts of storyline. Laura's mother texted me paragraphs about family business and what your father would have wanted, phrases that tasted like soap. Then, 2 weeks later, a short message: "I'm sorry." I think she'd seen the report. Blood can be a weapon, it can also be a mirror. I met Laura once in a park between filings. Neutral ground with ducks. She wore a sweater like armor and sunglasses like a curtain. You could have told me privately, she said, as if the privacy I'd kept for months didn't count because it wasn't choreographed by her. I told her I'd filed under seal. The judge chose to show her. She said she hadn't meant for it to go this far. I asked, how far did you intend? She looked down and said she didn't know, which is its own kind of sentence. Then she said something that detonated a different room inside me. You're not going to stay in her life just to hurt me, are you? I tasted metal. I'm going to stay because I'm her dad in all the ways that don't require math, I said. I'm also not going to pay you to lie about it. She flinched, and for a second I saw the person I met by the river, the one who wanted everything fast because standing still felt like drowning. It didn't excuse anything. It did keep me from using my words like knives. Ethan's involvement complicated everything and nothing. He wanted to be in Ellie's life, loudly at first and then like a person who keeps touching a bruise. Maya left him. Not because of Ellie. I watched her kneel to tie Ellie's shoe in the courthouse hallway one morning with a tenderness that nearly put me on the floor, but because a pattern she'd been talking herself out of for years had finally formed a line. She and I didn't become friends exactly. We did become something that feels like people who survived the same building collapse and now keep each other's spare keys. The court eventually offered a mosaic that didn't make anyone jubilant and did make sense: temporary joint legal decision-making shared among the three of us, yes, awkward to say out loud, with primary day-to-day care at Laura's until a longer evaluation finished, and structured, generous parenting time for me because I'm the only dad Ellie has known. Ethan got time too, ramping up slowly so Ellie's small nervous system wouldn't be thrown into a pinball machine. Financially, obligations would follow biology, not story. I would contribute to extras when Ellie was with me because I wanted to, not because a lie had been notarized into law. Humiliation for Laura came in smaller doses than the courtroom moment, which is how humiliation actually works. The group chat that used to applaud her self-care got quiet. Colleagues stopped inviting her to lunches where people perform being modern. A cousin posted a vague quote about truth always winning, and half the family liked it. The other half texted her privately about forgiveness as if forgiveness is a coupon you can hand someone to get a discount on consequences. Laura tried to stage comebacks: new hair, new photos, a caption about new chapters. The algorithm clapped. Real life didn't move. There were other reveals, less cinematic and more knife-by-paper cut. I found small withdrawals from our savings sprinkled across the last year, hotel stays coded as work. A notice about a credit card in both our names that I didn't open. A text from Megan, short and true: I'm sorry I stayed quiet too long. The sentence I kept hearing from people who loved both of us was, it's complicated, which is what we say when the math is simple and the feelings are loud. The worst moment came on a Tuesday in my kitchen. Ellie was with me. She toddled to the fridge, banged it with both palms, and said, milk, with a triumph that would make the word feel new to anyone. I poured it, she drank, and then she looked up at me with Laura's mouth and said, Dada. My body made a sound I'd never heard it make. I felt joy and grief punch each other in the chest and then sit down to cry together. I picked her up and said, yes. It was both true and not what the lab said. I am still not sure how to arrange that in a sentence without tearing it. People kept asking me what I wanted from all this: money back from weddings, credit for being the reasonable one, a parade. I wanted boring. I wanted Tuesday nights with overcooked pasta and a toddler who insists peas are for throwing and then eats them with both hands. I wanted a folder labeled proof that gathers dust until the day I can shred it without shaking. I wanted to stop waking up at 3 a.m. with the word unsafe buzzing in my head like a mosquito because she'd planned to use it if I didn't cooperate with her fiction. The last time Laura laughed in front of me was months after the hearing. Not that same laugh, a smaller one that wanted to be forgiven. We were at a child handoff in a grocery store parking lot because that's where modern families exchange batons. Ellie was in her car seat counting clouds. Laura said she was seeing someone new. Someone who knew the whole story and didn't judge. I said I hoped he liked Parks and Patience. She did the small laugh and then asked if I hated her. I told her no. Hate is a hobby that eats its owners. I don't forgive you yet, I said. That's a different thing. She nodded like she'd read the syllabus. I keep thinking about the day in court, the way Laura signed her name like a flourish that would make the ending pretty, and then the judge handed her a piece of paper that refused to flatter anyone. I didn't keep the DNA report to spring it like a trap, I kept it because every conversation until that room had been a fog bank where words got lost. In the end, it wasn't a weapon. It was a compass. It pointed us all, unwilling, at true north. There will be people who read this and want to know if I would do it differently, if I would have shown her quietly over coffee. If I would have let time, that famous healer, do the work. I don't know. I know I didn't want to turn my daughter into a trial or my ex into a cautionary meme. I know I wanted to be able to look Ellie in the face one day and tell her that when the grown-ups broke, some of us still told the truth without turning her into a scoreboard. Ellie grows like all children do, painfully fast and so slow you miss it if you blink. She has a way of pointing at birds like she's assigning them tasks. She naps better at my place because I keep the room colder. She likes when I read the same book wrong on purpose. Sometimes she asks for "mommy house" from my couch and for "dada house" from Laura's. The map of her life will be complicated because we made it that way. My job is to keep the roads plowed. The folder labeled "Proof" lives in a drawer I don't open often. Next to it is my father's will, with the line about "first grandchild of my blood." I thought for a while that sentence would haunt me. It doesn't anymore. He wasn't saying love needs paperwork. He was saying money does. Those are different ledgers. The trust went back into the family account because rules are rules. I started a new account with a name Ellie can't read yet. It's not much. It's honest. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment goes quiet and the plant by the window does its soft, green breathing, I replay the judge handing her the envelope and her face folding around the number like it could swallow it whole. I don't feel vindicated. I feel sad for the years we both lost to a story that required lying to stay upright. I feel grateful to whoever invented the boring, blunt mercy of lab reports. I feel tired in the way that follows long swims. I don't have a moral. I have a request for anyone who finds themselves where I was: write dates. Save the thing you don't want to see. Keep your voice low. Don't let someone else hire your conscience as their PR firm. And remember that love and law run on different clocks. One can be true while the other says zero. Some days you'll hate that. Some days it will save you. This morning Ellie pointed at the sun and said, "Bull." I said, "Close enough, because perfection is for people who never had to redo their maps." I made coffee. I packed a tiny backpack with snacks. We went to the park. She climbed a ladder she was scared of last week and laughed at the top, not like someone who'd won, but like someone who'd figured out where her feet go. I'm trying to do the same. And even with a drawer full of papers and a phone mercifully quiet, I still have nights when I stare at the ceiling fan and whisper the sentence I'm a little ashamed of: I don't know what to do. But in the morning I make eggs, and we count clouds, and the day, stubborn as ever, begins.
Follow me for more stories.